Welcome to the JEE Prep Hub one-shot series for Class 11 Alternative English. Today we are studying When Autumn Came by Faiz Ahmed Faiz. This is a full chapter lecture, not a 2-minute summary. We will read the poem as a complete movement, understand every important image, revise the glossary, solve all the textbook comprehension questions, and then practice the question types that may be formed from the chapter. Any added practice question will be clearly identified as JEE Prep Hub original practice, not as an official previous year question. Before we begin, keep your textbook or the supplied chapter scan open. The safest exam preparation is always to study the complete prescribed text and then use these notes to understand it deeply. Let us begin with a simple question. What do you usually associate with autumn? You may think of golden leaves, cool air, maturity, beauty, or a gentle sadness. Faiz Ahmed Faiz deliberately changes this expectation. In this poem, autumn is not a decorative postcard. It behaves like a harsh force. It strips trees, scatters their leaves, silences birds, and creates a world in which pain receives no answer. Yet, the poem does not end in complete despair. It ends with a request for green leaves and one bird's song. So our central movement today is destruction, silence, prayer, and renewal. Here is the exam map for this full class. First, we will understand the literal scene, what happens to the trees, the fallen leaves, and the birds. Second, we will decode the body imagery. Words such as skin, bodies, hearts, veins, throat, and blood are not accidental. They make nature appear alive and vulnerable. Third, we will follow the tone. The poem begins severely, becomes mournful, turns into prayer, and finally becomes cautiously hopeful. Fourth, we will master the printed textbook questions. These include one-word questions, short answers, detailed answers, and own words responses. Fifth, we will work through original practice questions in objective, extract-based, device-based, and long answer formats. For a 1- or 2-word question, give the exact phrase. If the question asks what the yellow leaves are compared to, the answer must be hearts. For a short answer, use 3 steps. Answer directly, provide a phrase from the poem, and explain the effect. For a detailed answer, use the answer ladder: claim, evidence, device or effect, and conclusion. Do not simply write that the poem is sad. Explain how the words create sadness. Do not simply write that the poet uses personification. State that the trees are given human bodies so that their suffering feels real. Before we move on, try to name 2 things that a board examiner can test from this chapter. Good answers include the comparison of yellow leaves with hearts, the meaning of ebony bodies naked, the silence of birds, the importance of the god of May, the symbolism of green and song, personification, violent imagery, the tone shift, and the idea that autumn temporarily disturbs but does not permanently destroy life. This lecture will cover all of them. Now let us meet the poet and place the poem inside its correct reading lens. Faiz Ahmed Faiz was born on the 13th of February 1911 in Sialkot in the district of Pakistan, and he died on the 20th of November 1984 in Lahore, according to the poet note in the supplied textbook. He was an eminent Urdu poet. The textbook mentions works such as Nuska Hai Wafa, Zindan Nama, Naqshe Faryadi, and Daste Saba. It presents Faiz as a Marxist and progressive poet whose poetry gives voice to those who are unjustly treated and oppressed. For an examination answer, do not turn the poet note into a long biography. Remember the essential profile. Faiz is a major Urdu poet. He combines lyrical beauty with humanist and progressive concerns, and he uses powerful metaphors to speak about suffering, injustice, and hope. The Academy of American Poets also identifies the poem as When Autumn Came by Faiz Ahmed Faiz and credits the translation to Naomi Lazard. Now, how does this information help us read the poem? The supplied textbook itself says that the poem should be read with its socio-political context in mind. This does not mean that we should invent a particular historical event. It means that the violent treatment of trees and birds can be understood as an indirect language of protest against violence and the silencing of humanity. The trees can suggest vulnerable bodies. The birds can suggest voices that are prevented from expressing themselves.
The hunter can suggest threat. The prayer for revival can suggest the hope that life and freedom will return. Always write this as a general, text-based interpretation. Let us now understand the poem's architecture. The poem is written in free verse. It does not depend on a fixed rhyme scheme or a regular sonnet pattern. Instead, its force comes from the movement of its images and its verbs. We can divide it into four movements. In the first movement, autumn attacks the trees. It strips them down to the skin, leaves their dark bodies naked, shakes out their hearts, and scatters the yellow leaves. In the second movement, the birds lose their voices. They are exiled from their song and fall into the dust before the hunter even strings his bow. In the third movement, the speaker turns from description to prayer. He appeals to the god of May and asks for mercy, resurrection, and the return of blood-like vitality. In the fourth movement, hope is expressed in its smallest possible form. Some tree should receive the gift of green, and one bird should sing. Notice the tone shift. The opening feels like testimony, almost like a witness saying, "This is the way autumn came." Then the tone becomes violent and mournful. The bird section deepens the silence. The prayer is urgent and compassionate. The final line is cautious but hopeful. This gives us the complete structural formula. Trees stripped, birds silenced, prayer to me, green and song. Keep this sequence in mind while we move into the close reading of stanza 1.
Let us now read the first movement of the poem carefully. The opening line says, "This is the way that autumn came to the trees." The phrase, "this is the way," sounds like testimony. The speaker is not giving us a decorative description. He sounds like a witness reporting exactly what happened. We should ask, what kind of action does autumn perform? The next idea says that autumn stripped the trees down to the skin. The verb stripped usually means to remove clothing or covering. When it is applied to trees, it gives autumn the role of an attacker and trees the role of exposed bodies. The words "down to the skin" intensify the feeling of vulnerability. Leaves are the covering of a tree. Once they are gone, the trunk is exposed. But the poet does not stop at the literal fact of leaf fall. He makes the scene bodily and emotional. The next image leaves their ebony bodies naked. Ebony suggests a dark or black-brown color, so the phrase helps us see the dark trunks. But the most important words are bodies and naked. The tree is not treated as an object. It is represented as a human-like body that has been exposed. This is personification. In your answer, do not merely say that the poet uses personification. Explain its effect. It makes the tree's suffering feel physical and human, so the reader becomes sympathetic. Now comes one of the most important lines for your examination. Autumn shook out their hearts, the yellow leaves. What are the yellow leaves compared to? Long pause. They are compared to the tree's hearts. This is the exact answer. The poet could have called them branches, ornaments, or clothing. Instead, he calls them hearts. The heart is the center of life and feeling. Therefore, the falling of the leaves is made to seem like the removal of the tree's inner life. This is a metaphor, and it also continues the personification of the tree. The yellow leaves are then scattered over the ground. Notice that the poet does not describe them as floating beautifully or forming a charming carpet. The verb scattered suggests disorder and abandonment. The living canopy has been broken into fragments and thrown across the ground. The next line says, anyone could trample them out of sheep. The word anyone is disturbing. It suggests that any ordinary passerby can walk over the leaves without thinking. The leaves are fragile, and the phrase "out of sheep" suggests crushing, damage, and loss of identity. The season has made the leaves vulnerable to casual violence. The last line of the movement says that this can happen undisturbed by a single moan of protest. The poem imagines leaves and trees as capable of protesting, but no protest is heard. This absence of sound creates a painful silence. It also gives the poem its wider significance. Suffering can be present, but those who pass by may remain undisturbed. The word moan is a low sound expressing pain. The phrase single moan makes the absence even more striking. Not even one sound of protest breaks the scene. Long pause. Let us gather the first stanza devices. We have personification because trees have skin, bodies, and hearts.
We have metaphor because leaves are hearts. We have visual imagery in yellow leaves, ebony bodies, and the ground. We have violent imagery in stripped, shook, scattered, and trampled. We have a contrast between living trees and the lifeless appearance of bare trunks. A possible short answer is this. The expression ebony bodies naked refers to the dark, bare trunks of trees after autumn removes their leaves. By giving the trunks human bodies and describing them as naked, the poet personifies nature and creates an image of vulnerability. A possible detailed answer on the helplessness of the trees should mention the exposed bodies, the leaves as hearts, the trampled leaves, the absence of protest, and the later image of withered bodies. When you connect these points, the reader sees autumn not as a neutral season but as a force that leaves nature defenseless. Now, remember the first three letters of our revision map. T, L, B. Trees stripped, leaves as hearts, birds banished. We have completed T and L. Next, we move from the body of the tree to the voice of the bird.
We now move to the second movement, where nature loses its voice. The poet says the birds that herald dreams were exiled from their song. First, let us understand the phrase herald dreams. To herald means to announce or signal. Birds are traditionally connected with morning, freedom, music, imagination, and hope. Their songs can announce a new day or suggest the arrival of dreams. So the birds in this poem represent more than animals. They represent the living voice of nature and the possibility of a better future. But these birds are exiled from their song. The word exiled is very important. To be exiled is to be banished or driven away from one's home. What is the home of a bird? It is not only the forest or the nest, it is also its natural voice. A bird belongs to its song. When the poet says the birds are exiled from their song, he shows that they have been separated from their own identity and natural expression. The next image makes this loss even more severe. Each voice is torn out of its throat. This is not ordinary seasonal quietness. It is an image of force. A voice is imagined as something that can be physically torn away. The throat is the place from which sound comes, so the line turns silence into an act of injury. This is one of the strongest images in the poem, and it is central to the textbook's suggestion that the poem can carry an indirect protest against the silencing of humanity. Again, be careful in your exam answer. You can say that the image suggests suppression or forced silence. You should not claim a particular historical event unless the question or text gives evidence. The birds then dropped into the dust. The word dropped suggests loss of flight, energy, and freedom. The word dust suggests mortality and defeat. Birds belong in the air, but they fall into the ground. Their movement has been reversed. The natural world has become a place of death-like stillness. The poet intensifies the threat with the hunter. The birds fall even before the hunter has strung his bow. Literally, the hunter has not yet prepared to shoot. Figuratively, the atmosphere of danger has already destroyed the birds. This suggests a condition in which vulnerable beings are broken even before the visible attack begins. The hunter may be read literally, but he can also symbolize an oppressive force or the constant possibility of violence. Now answer this question for yourself. Why is the silence in this poem not peaceful? The answer is that this silence follows the loss of protest and song. The voice is torn from the throat. The birds are exiled from their song. The birds fall into dust. So this is not the silence of meditation or rest. It is the silence of suffering and suppression. Let us connect the second movement to the first. The trees lost their covering and their hearts, the leaves. The birds lose their voices and songs. In both cases, nature is deprived of what allows it to live and express itself. The trees are wounded bodies, the birds are silenced voices. This is why the poem can move beyond a seasonal description. The natural images become mirrors of human vulnerability. Important word meanings. Herald means announce. Exiled means banished or driven away. A moan is a low sound that expresses pain. Dust suggests the ground, mortality, and defeat. The textbook question asks, what does the poet mean by birds that herald dreams? The answer is that their songs announce hope, beauty, awakening, and the possibility of dreams. Another question asks how autumn affects the birds' lives.
It exiles them from their songs, silences their voices, and makes them fall into dust before the hunter can shoot. In an exam, you can write, the birds symbolize freedom and expression. Autumn affects them by taking away the songs through which they communicate. The phrase, each voice torn out of its throat, converts silence into a violent image, while dust and the hunter deepen the sense of danger. We have now completed the first two movements, trees stripped and birds banished. The poem is about to change direction. After showing us destruction and silence, the speaker turns toward prayer. Let us see how the God of me becomes the possibility of resurrection.
We have seen autumn strip the trees and silence the birds. Now the poem enters its turning point. The speaker says, O God of May, have mercy. This line is an apostrophe, a direct address to a power that is not physically present. It also sounds like prayer. The word May is not only a month in the calendar. In this poem, May represents spring, warmth, growth, freshness, and the life-giving power that follows winter and autumn. Why does the speaker address May as God? Because the speaker needs a power capable of reversing the damage. The trees are not merely leafless, they are described as withered bodies. Withered means dried, shriveled, or deprived of vitality. The word bodies continues the personification that began in the first stanza. The trees are now like living beings who have suffered injury. The speaker asks the god of May to bless these withered bodies with the passion of resurrection. Resurrection traditionally means rising to new life after death. In the poem, it is a metaphor for the return of sap, leaves, color, and vitality. The word passion gives the revival intensity. The speaker does not ask for a weak or decorative recovery. He wants a powerful force that can overcome the death-like state. The next image is make their dead veins flow with blood again. Trees do not literally have human veins or blood, but the poet uses this human body metaphor to create a sense of life within the tree. We can connect the image to the movement of sap through a tree, but the emotional effect is more important. A body with flowing blood is alive. A body with dead veins is lifeless. The speaker therefore asks for the return of inner vitality. Notice the grammar of the prayer. Have mercy. Bless these bodies. Make their veins flow. These are urgent commands or appeals. The imperative verbs show that the speaker has moved from observing damage to asking for intervention. The poem has not forgotten the suffering of the earlier stanzas. Instead, the prayer responds to it. Now let us turn to the final two lines. The speaker asks, give some tree the gift of green again. Let one bird sing. The gift of green means greenery, fresh leaves, and new growth. Green is a symbol of life, freshness, continuation, and hope. It is called a gift because renewal is imagined as grace after devastation. The ending is powerful because it is restrained. The speaker does not demand that the entire landscape immediately return to full beauty. He asks for some tree and one bird. Why one? One living tree would prove that nature is not permanently defeated. One bird's song would break the silence and prove that expression has returned. The singular request makes the hope modest, believable, and deeply moving. The final line is very short. Let one bird sing. Its brevity gives it force. After the poem has described many trees and many birds, one voice is enough. This voice is not only the sound of a bird, it can symbolize freedom, identity, dreams, and the return of hope. Let us answer two textbook questions. Why does the poet invoke the god of May? He invokes May as the power of spring and renewal, asking it to restore life, greenery, and song to devastated nature. Why does he associate the god of May with the passion of resurrection? Because May can revive the apparently dead trees, just as resurrection represents new life rising from death. The poem therefore ends with cautious hope, not with an exaggerated victory. The devastation remains real, but it is not final. The dead veins can flow again, green can return, a bird can sing. The sequence is now complete. Trees stripped, leaves as hearts, birds banished, prayer, gift of green, single song. Next, we will gather the themes and symbols so that you can write a strong, long answer. Let us now consolidate the themes and symbols of When Autumn Came. A good literature answer does not merely list themes. It explains how the images create the theme. The first major theme is destruction disguised as seasonal change. Autumn is often described as beautiful, colorful, or gently melancholic. Faiz reverses that expectation. Autumn strips, shakes, scatters, tramples, exiles, tears, and drops. These are active verbs. They make the season behave like an attacker rather than a neutral natural process. Short pause. The second theme is vulnerability and helplessness. The trees cannot protect themselves. Their leaves are exposed on the ground. Anyone can trample them. There is not even a single moan of protest. The birds cannot retain their songs. They fall into dust before the hunter has even prepared his bow. The repeated image is of a living being that is unable to defend itself. Medium pause. The third theme is silence and the suppression of voice. Sound should belong to the natural world. The leaves might moan, the birds should sing. But the poem gives us the absence of protest, the exile from song, and voices torn from throats. This is not peaceful quietness, it is forced silence. The final request, "let one bird sing," becomes powerful because it shows how completely sound has disappeared. Short pause. The fourth theme is nature as a mirror of human suffering. Trees are given skin, bodies, hearts, veins, and blood. Birds have voices that can be torn away. Through personification, the suffering of nature becomes recognizable as human suffering. A bare tree is not just a botanical fact, it becomes an exposed body. A silent bird is not just a quiet animal, it becomes a silenced voice. Medium pause. The fifth theme is hope and renewal. The poem does not end in permanent death. The speaker asks for resurrection, flowing blood, the gift of green, and one singing bird. Green is the color of new leaves and fresh growth. Song is the return of voice and freedom. The hope is cautious because it asks for only some tree and one bird. But a small sign of life can be enough to challenge total despair. Long pause. Now let us understand the symbols. Autumn symbolizes decline, destruction, and the temporary domination of death-like forces. May symbolizes spring, mercy, warmth, and the power of revival. Dust symbolizes defeat, mortality, and the loss of living movement. Green symbolizes growth, freshness, continuity, and renewal. Song symbolizes freedom, identity, dreams, and expression. The poem is built on contrasts: autumn against May, dust against green, silence against song, and apparent death against resurrection. Short pause. The textbook summary also suggests a socio-political undertone. The poem may be read as an indirect protest against violence upon humanity. The trees can represent vulnerable bodies stripped of protection. The birds can represent voices prevented from speaking. The hunter can represent a threatening force. The absent moon and torn voices suggest that suffering may be silenced or ignored. But write this carefully. The poem does not name a particular political event. Therefore, an exam answer should say that the natural images can symbolically suggest oppression, violence, and the suppression of voice. Do not claim a specific historical reference unless your textbook provides it. Here is a model paragraph. The poem presents nature as a mirror of human suffering. The trees are described through the language of the body, with skin, bodies, hearts, and veins, while the birds lose their songs and voices. These images transform autumn into a picture of vulnerability and silencing. However, the prayer to May and the request for green and song introduce hope. The poem therefore connects the pain of nature with wider human experiences of oppression and recovery. That paragraph follows the answer ladder: point, evidence, explanation, and link. We will now add the literary devices and track the tone shift in detail. We now focus on the literary devices, tone, and structure. The most important device in the poem is personification. Personification means giving human qualities to non-human things. Here, the trees have skin, bodies, hearts, veins, and blood. The birds have voices that can be torn from their throats, and they can be exiled from their songs.
This makes nature feel alive and capable of suffering. In an exam answer, always add the effect. The poet uses personification to make the tree's suffering human and emotionally relatable. The poem also uses metaphor. The yellow leaves are called the tree's hearts. The veins and blood create an extended body metaphor, while the gift of green becomes a metaphor for renewed life. The word resurrection is another powerful metaphor. It turns the seasonal return of life into a spiritual image of rising from apparent death. Another major device is violent imagery. The words stripped, naked, shook, scattered, trample, exiled, torn, dropped, and dust create a visual and emotional picture of damage. These are not soft autumn words, they are harsh and physical. Their effect is to make the seasonal change feel like an assault on vulnerable life. We also have apostrophe, which is a direct address to someone or something that is not physically present. The speaker says, "O God of me, have mercy." This direct address turns the poem into a prayer. The imperative verbs bless, make, give, and let show the urgency of that prayer. Contrast is also central. Autumn is set against me. Naked bodies are set against resurrection. Dust is set against the gift of green. Silence is set against one bird's song. These opposites create the poem's larger movement from destruction to renewal. Let us now track the tone. At the beginning, the tone is witness like and severe. The phrase, "this is the way," sounds like testimony. The description becomes violent and mournful as the trees are stripped and the leaves are trampled. The bird stanza makes the mood even more tragic because natural voices disappear. Then the prayer introduces a supplicating and compassionate tone. Finally, the poem becomes cautiously hopeful. The hope is not loud or certain, it is concentrated in some tree and one bird. The poem is written in free verse. It does not depend on a fixed rhyme scheme. Do not claim that the poem follows a sonnet or a regular ballad pattern. Its structure is driven by four unequal stanzas and the sequence of its images. The first stanza focuses on trees and leaves. The second focuses on birds and silence. The third turns to prayer. The fourth compresses hope into two short lines. Here is a useful device question. Identify the device in the phrase, "the yellow leaves the hearts of the trees." The best answer is metaphor, within an extended personification of the tree. Here is another. What is the effect of the words torn out of its throat? They make silence feel violent and forced. Here is a third. What is the significance of the contrast between autumn and May? It presents autumn as a period of destruction and May as the power of revival. Remember the rule. Identify the device, quote or mention the phrase, and explain its effect. A list without explanation does not show literary understanding. We are now ready for the answer clinic, where we will turn these interpretations into board style responses.
We now enter the textbook answer clinic. Keep your answer length aligned with the question. Section 1 asks for answers in one or two words. Question 1. With what does the poet compare the yellow leaves? The answer is the tree's hearts. Question 2. Who remains undisturbed by the single moan of protest? The answer is anyone. Question 3. Who are exiled from their song in autumn? The answer is the birds. Question 4. With whom does the poet plead for mercy? The answer is the god of May. Question 5. What does the poet mean by the gift of green? The answer is greenery or fresh growth. Section 2 asks for a few words each. Question 1. What happens to the leaves in autumn? Autumn shakes the yellow leaves from the trees, scatters them on the ground, and leaves them open to being trampled. Question 2. What do you understand by ebony bodies naked? It means that the dark, bare tree trunks are exposed after autumn removes the leaves. The trees are personified as naked human bodies. Question 3.
What does the poet mean by birds that herald dreams? He means birds whose songs announce hope, beauty, awakening, and the possibility of dreams. Question 4. How does autumn affect the birds' lives? It exiles them from their songs, silences their voices, and makes them fall into dust before the hunter can shoot. Question 5. Why does the poet invoke the god of May? He invokes May as the power of spring and renewal and asks it to restore life, greenery, and song. Section 3 asks detailed questions. Let us model the first one. How does the poet describe the helplessness of the trees in autumn? Begin directly. The poet presents the trees as exposed and unable to resist autumn. Then explain the evidence. Autumn strips them down to the skin and leaves their dark bodies naked. Their yellow leaves are their hearts, but these hearts are shaken out and scattered. Anyone can trample them without hearing a moan of protest. The later expressions, withered bodies and dead veins, make the trees appear almost lifeless. Conclude with the device and effect. Through personification and body imagery, a seasonal process becomes a picture of human-like suffering. The second detailed question asks how the poet creates the impression that autumn is a time of silence. Begin by saying that silence is created through the absence of protest and song. The leaves are trampled without a moan, the birds are exiled from their song, and each voice is imagined as torn from its throat. Their fall into dust removes them from the living soundscape. Finally, the request, "Let one bird sing," shows that song has disappeared. Conclude that this is not peaceful quietness, it is painful silence produced by loss and suppression. The third question asks how the poem represents trees as human entities. Mention skin, bodies, hearts, veins, and blood. Explain that these features give trees a human body and the ability to experience injury, weakness, and possible healing. The phrase "moan of protest" also gives nature a human capacity for pain and resistance. The fourth question asks whether the poem expresses hope for positive change despite its dismal mood. Your answer is yes. Mention the negative images first: stripping, nakedness, scattering, exile, torn voices, dust, and death. Then show the turning point: the prayer to the god of May, resurrection, flowing veins, the gift of green, and one singing bird. Conclude that the hope is cautious but real, because devastation is not permanent. The fifth question asks why the poet associates the god of May with the passion of resurrection and why he says, "Let one bird sing." May symbolizes spring, warmth, growth, and the return of life. Resurrection represents the revival of apparently dead trees. The request for one bird's song is a small but powerful sign of hope. One song would break silence and prove that life and freedom can return. Section 4 asks for answers in your own words. For the question about images of violence, explain that autumn acts like an attacker. It strips, exposes, shakes, scatters, tramples, exiles, tears, and drops. For the question about the distinctive treatment of nature, explain that nature is presented as a living community with bodies, feelings, voices, and hopes. For the question about the faith that autumn temporarily disturbs life, explain the prayer for resurrection, flowing veins, the gift of green, and the singing bird. Do not copy the whole poem. Translate the images into clear prose, but keep the meaning. The most common mistake is to write a vague summary without answering the exact question. Always begin with a direct answer, include 2 or 3 relevant images, explain their effect, and finish by linking back to the question. Now we will practice additional original questions that cover the same examinable ideas in different formats.
We will now do a practice question session. These are JEE Prep Hub original practice questions created from the ideas of the chapter. They are not being presented as official previous year questions. First, objective practice. Question 1. The yellow leaves are compared to the trees what? The answer is hearts. Question 2. The god of May symbolizes what? The answer is renewal and spring. Question 3. What does exiled from their song suggest? It suggests that the birds are separated from their natural voice and expression. Question 4. What does the gift of green refer to? It refers to greenery and fresh growth. Question 5.
What is the final mood of the poem? It is cautiously hopeful. Question 6. Which device is most clearly used when trees are given bodies and veins? Personification, supported by an extended body metaphor. Question 7. What is the form of the poem? Free verse. Question 8. Which pair presents the central contrast? Autumn and May. Now fill in the blanks. Autumn leaves the tree's ebony bodies what? Naked. The yellow leaves are the tree's what? Hearts. The birds are what from their song? Exiled. The speaker asks the god of May to have what? Mercy. The speaker asks that one bird should what? Sing. The poem moves from destruction and silence towards what? Hope or renewal. Now let us practice very short answers. Why is the opening phrase, "this is the way," important? It gives the poem a witness-like tone, as if the speaker is recording exactly how autumn harms nature. What does dust suggest? It suggests defeat, mortality, and the loss of living movement. Why is the word anyone disturbing? It suggests that anyone can trample the fallen leaves casually and remain indifferent to their suffering. What do birds symbolize? They symbolize freedom, expression, dreams, hope, and the living music of nature. What does resurrection add? It adds the image of rising into new life from apparent death. Why is the word one significant in the final line? Because even one sign of life and freedom is enough to challenge total despair. Now let us practice short answers. Explain the single moon of protest. The phrase imagines the leaves or trees as living beings capable of pain. The absence of even one moon shows their helplessness and suggests that suffering can remain unnoticed. How does the poet use sound and silence together? The poem mentions a moon, birds' songs, voices, and the final request to let one bird sing. But all of these sounds are absent or threatened. This makes the silence feel fused rather than natural. Explain dead veins flow with blood again. The trees personify as a body with veins. Literally, the image suggests the return of sap and life. Metaphorically, it asks for vitality to return to something that appears dead. Why can the poem be read as more than a description of autumn? Because its language of stripping, trampling, exile, own voices, and dust resembles the language of violence and oppression. What is distinctive about the ending? It is prayerful, brief, and cautiously hopeful. Instead of promising that everything will immediately be restored, it asks for some green and one bird song. For a long answer, you can be asked to discuss the movement from destruction to renewal. Start with autumn stripping the trees and scattering the leaves. Explain the birds' exile from song and their fall into dust. Then show the turning point, prayer to me, resurrection, flowing blood, green, and song. Conclude that the poem acknowledges real suffering while keeping open the possibility of recovery. Another long answer may ask you to examine personification. Mention skin, bodies, hearts, veins, blood, and voices torn from throats. Explain that these features turn nature's suffering into a human-like experience and connect the natural scene to wider ideas of vulnerability and silenced life. When you practice, write from memory first. Then compare your response with the model answer in the question bank. The goal is not to memorize every sentence. The goal is to remember the structure, the evidence, and the effect.
We are now at the final answer writing clinic and rapid revision. The most reliable format is point, evidence, explanation, and link. State the idea directly. Mention a short phrase from the poem. Explain how the phrase creates meaning. Then connect the idea back to the question. Suppose the question asks, how does the poet depict autumn through a series of images of violence? Begin with the claim that autumn is shown as an active destroyer rather than a gentle season. Use the evidence. It strips the trees to the skin, leaves their bodies naked, shakes out their hearts, scatters the leaves, and allows them to be trampled. Then move to the birds. They are exiled from song. Their voices are torn, and they fall into dust before the hunter prepares his bow. Finally, explain the effect. These verbs make seasonal change feel like assault and turn nature into a symbol of vulnerable life. If the question asks you to describe the poet's distinctive treatment of nature, write that nature is presented as a living community rather than as a decorative background. Trees have skin, bodies, hearts, veins, and blood. Birds have voices and songs. Therefore, nature can feel pain, lose its voice, and experience renewal. If the question asks how the poem expresses faith that autumn only temporarily disturbs life, mention the prayer to me, resurrection, dead veins flowing with blood, the gift of green, and the one bird song. These symbols show that autumn may make nature appear dead, but spring-like renewal remains possible. Avoid 3 common mistakes. First, do not write only a plot summary when the question asks about a device or theme. Second, do not list devices without explaining their effects. Third, do not call a JEE Prep Hub original practice question an official previous year question. Now the rapid fire revision. With what are the yellow leaves compared? The tree's hearts. Who remains undisturbed by the single moan of protest? Anyone. Who are exiled from their song? The birds. With whom does the poet plead for mercy? The god of May. What does the gift of green mean? Greenery or fresh growth. What is the dominant poetic device? Personification through extended body imagery. What does ebony bodies naked mean? The dark, bare tree trunks exposed after the leaves fall. Why are the birds described as heralds of dreams? Because their songs announce hope, awakening, beauty, and dreams. Why is the silence painful? Because the birds' voices are forcibly removed and even the leaves have no moan of protest. What does the hunter add? A threat of danger and violence. What does resurrection mean in context? The revival of life after an appearance of death. What is the tone at the end? Cautiously hopeful. Keep the final mnemonic T, L, B, P, G, S. Trees stripped, leaves as hearts, birds banished, prayer, gift of green, single song. This sequence gives you the complete poem in 6 cues. Before the exam, revise the complete poem, the glossary, the textbook summary, and every printed question in the supplied chapter. Use your own words in long answers, but preserve the evidence and the sequence of ideas. The poem's central message is simple but powerful. Destruction can silence life for a time, but it does not necessarily defeat the possibility of renewal. Thank you for joining this JEE Prep Hub one-shot lecture. Study with understanding, write with evidence, and best of luck in your examinations. We are adding one more detailed revision chapter so that this lecture genuinely covers the full supplied unit. Let us revise the complete glossary in context. The word stripped means laid bare or deprived of covering. In the poem, it describes the trees losing their protective leaves. Ebony means black or dark brown timber. The phrase ebony bodies points to the dark trunks that remain after the leaves disappear, but it also makes the trees look like human bodies. Trample means to tread on or walk over. The fallen leaves can be trampled out of shape, which gives the seasonal scene a harsh image of casual damage. A moan is a low sound that expresses pain. The phrase "a single moan of protest" is important because even this small sound is absent. Herald means announce or signal. The birds that herald dreams are birds whose songs announce hope, beauty, awakening, or the possibility of a better future.
Exiled means banished or driven away. The birds are exiled from their song, which means they are separated from their natural voice and identity. God of me represents the spring or life-giving power that follows the season of loss. Me is imagined as a power that can show mercy and restore growth. Withered bodies are dried, shriveled, or lifeless forms. The trees appear like withered bodies after autumn has stripped them. Resurrection means revival or a new phase of life. In this poem, it describes the return of vitality to trees that appeared dead. The gift of green means greenery, fresh leaves, and renewed growth. Now, let us practice the words in sentences. If the question asks what is meant by ebony bodies naked, write that the dark, bare tree trunks are exposed after autumn removes their leaves. If the question asks what are birds that herald dreams, answer that they are birds whose songs announce hope and dreams. If the question asks why the word exiled is effective, say that it suggests banishment from the bird's own natural expression. If the question asks what resurrection means, write revival or the return of life. These words also build the poem's emotional pattern. Stripped, naked, trample, mourn, exiled, torn, and dust belong to the vocabulary of loss and vulnerability. Mercy, resurrection, blood, green, and sing belong to the vocabulary of recovery and renewal. This contrast is useful in a long answer because it shows that the poem's diction changes with its tone. A common exam mistake is to give a dictionary meaning without applying it to the poem. For example, if you write that herald means announce, add what the birds announce, dreams, hope, or awakening. If you write that resurrection means coming back to life, add what is revived, the withered trees, their dead looking veins, and the life of nature. Quick check. What does anyone refer to in the line about a single moan of protest? It refers to any person who could trample the leaves and remain undisturbed. What does dust suggest? It suggests defeat, mortality, and the ground. What does green suggest? It suggests leaves, freshness, continuity, and hope. What does song suggest? It suggests voice, freedom, identity, and the return of life. The glossary is not a separate section from the analysis. Each word becomes meaningful because of the image around it. The word naked connects to the body metaphor. The word hearts connects leaves to inner life. The word exiled connects birds to the loss of freedom. The word resurrection connects May to hope. The word green completes the movement from autumn to renewal. Keep these connections ready for short answers and detailed explanations.
In this additional answer writing chapter, we will model the 4 most important long answers. Listen first for the structure and then notice how the evidence is explained. Question 1. How does the poet describe the helplessness of the trees in autumn? A strong answer begins directly. The poet describes the trees as exposed, vulnerable, and unable to resist the force of autumn. Autumn strips them down to the skin and leaves their dark bodies naked. Their yellow leaves are imagined as their hearts, but these hearts are shaken out and scattered on the ground. Anyone can trample the leaves out of shape, and there is not even a single moan of protest. The later images of withered bodies and dead veins deepen the impression of weakness and lifelessness. Through personification and body imagery, the poet turns a seasonal process into a picture of human-like suffering. Notice the sequence: direct claim, several images, explanation of the device, and conclusion. Question 2. How does the poet create the impression that autumn is a time of silence? A model answer is this. The poet creates silence through the absence of protest and song. The fallen leaves can be trampled without producing a single moan of protest. The birds who should herald dreams through their songs are exiled from their song, and each voice is imagined as torn from its throat. They drop into the dust, so the sound of birds is removed from the natural world. The final request, let one bird sing, shows that song has disappeared almost completely. Therefore, the silence is not peaceful quietness. It is a painful silence produced by loss and suppression. Notice how the final line is used as evidence for the earlier silence. Question 3. How does the poem represent trees as human entities? The poem repeatedly gives trees human physical features and experiences.
They have skin, bodies, hearts, veins, and blood. They can be naked, withered, and apparently dead. The yellow leaves are called their hearts, and the veins are imagined as carrying blood. The phrase moan of protest also gives nature a human capacity for pain and resistance. This personification makes the reader sympathize with the trees and allows the poet to connect natural destruction with human vulnerability. Here, the answer names the device but also explains its effect. Question 4. Does the poem express hope for positive change despite its dismal mood? Yes, it does. The first part is filled with images of stripping, nakedness, scattering, exile, torn voices, dust, and death. However, the speaker then prays to the god of May to have mercy and bless the withered bodies with the passion of resurrection. He asks for dead veins to flow with blood again, for a tree to receive the gift of green, and for one bird to sing. These requests express the belief that devastation is not permanent. The hope is cautious rather than exaggerated. One green tree and one singing bird would be enough to begin renewal. Now, let us model the own words question about violence. The poet depicts autumn through a series of images that resemble physical assault. It strips the trees, leaves their bodies exposed, shakes out their hearts, and scatters the leaves where they can be trampled. It also silences the birds by exiling them from their songs and tearing their voices from their throats. The birds fall into dust before the hunter has even prepared his bow. These harsh verbs make autumn an active destroyer and turn natural change into a symbol of suffering. For the own words question about the distinctive treatment of nature, write that nature is treated as a living community rather than as a decorative background. Trees have bodies and feelings, and birds have voices and songs. Nature can therefore experience pain, silence, and revival. The poem's human body language connects environmental change to wider human experiences of vulnerability and recovery. For the own words question about faith that autumn is temporary, write that the poem makes nature look dead but never says that life is permanently destroyed. The prayer to May, the resurrection image, the return of blood like vitality, the gift of green, and the final bird song all suggest that decline is followed by renewal. When you write your own answer, do not copy the model sentence by sentence. Preserve the argument, the evidence, and the conclusion, but use clear language of your own. That is exactly what the textbook means by answer in your own words.
This is an extract-based practice round. Every item in this round is JEE Prep Hub original practice, created from the supplied poem. Extract 1. Stripped them down to the skin, left their ebony bodies naked. Question 1. What does them refer to? The answer is the trees. Question 2. What does ebony suggest? It suggests a dark or black-brown color, helping us visualize the trunks. Question 3. Identify the main device. Personification, supported by body imagery. Question 4. What picture is created? Bare, dark trunks are presented as exposed human bodies. Question 5. What mood does this extract create? Vulnerability, shock, and helplessness. Extract 2. It shook out their hearts, the yellow leaves, scattered them over the ground. Question 1. What are the hearts? The yellow leaves. Question 2. Why is hearts a metaphor? Because leaves are not literally hearts, but they are represented as the center of the tree's life. Question 3. What is the effect of scattered? It creates a picture of disorder and abandonment rather than gentle beauty. Question 4. Which answer is required in section 1 if asked what the leaves are compared with? Hearts. Extract 3.
Anyone could trample them out of shape, undisturbed by a single moan of protest. Question 1. Who remains undisturbed? Anyone. Question 2. What does trample mean? To tread on or walk over. Question 3. What does the absence of a moan suggest? It suggests helplessness and painful silence. Question 4. Is this silence peaceful? No. It is the silence of suffering and the absence of protest. Extract 4. The birds that herald dreams were exiled from their song. Question 1. What do the birds herald? Dreams, hope, or awakening. Question 2. What does exiled mean? Banished or driven away. Question 3. What does song symbolize? Freedom, identity, expression, and hope. Question 4. How does the phrase exiled from their song make the birds seem vulnerable? It shows that they are separated from their natural voice and from the freedom to express themselves. Extract 5. Each voice torn out of its throat. Question 1. What kind of imagery is used? Violent and bodily imagery. Question 2. What is the effect? It makes silence feel forced and injurious rather than natural. Question 3. How can this support the textbook's wider reading? It can suggest the suppression of human voices and the indirect protest against violence, while remaining a general interpretation. Extract 6. O God of me, have mercy. Bless these widowed bodies with the passion of your resurrection. Question 1. Whom does the speaker address? The God of me. Question 2. What does me symbolize? Spring, warmth, growth, and renewal. Question 3. What does resurrection mean here? The return of life to apparently dead or withered nature. Question 4. What is the tone? Prayerful, compassionate, and urgent. Extract 7. Give some tree the gift of green again. Let one bird sing. Question 1. What does the gift of green mean? Fresh greenery and new leaves. Question 2. Why is the word gift important? It suggests that renewal is a blessing or grace after devastation. Question 3. Why does the poet ask for one bird? Because one song would be enough to break the complete silence and signal the return of life. Question 4. What is the mood of the ending? Cautiously hopeful. In an extract-based answer, always identify the reference, answer each question in the requested length, and connect a device to its effect. Do not write a full essay for a 1-mark question, and do not give a one-word reply when the question asks for explanation. This balance is part of exam technique.
Before we close, let us spend a few more minutes on how to revise this chapter intelligently and how to avoid the mistakes that cost marks. First, separate the poem into 3 layers. The first layer is factual recall. You should know the poet's name, the meaning of the difficult words, the comparison of yellow leaves with hearts, the identity of the god of May, and the meaning of the gift of green. The second layer is close reading. You should be able to explain why the trees are described with skin, bodies, hearts, veins, and blood, and why the birds are described through song, voice, throat, dust, and the hunter. The third layer is interpretation.
You should be able to explain destruction, silence, personification, symbolism, hope, and the general socio-political undertones suggested by the textbook. Let us review common mistakes. Mistake 1. Calling the poem a simple description of autumn. It is a description of autumn, but the violent verbs make it symbolic. Always mention stripping, trampling, exile, torn voices, or dust when the question asks about the deeper meaning. Mistake 2. Calling the final mood completely happy. The ending is hopeful, but it is cautiously hopeful. The poet asks for only some tree and one bird. He does not pretend that the destruction never happened. Mistake 3. Saying that the trees are literally bleeding. The poem uses a human body metaphor. You can explain that blood represents vitality and that the image may also evoke the movement of sap. Mistake 4. Writing that all birds are physically killed by a hunter. The poem says that they drop into dust even before the hunter strings his bow. The hunter intensifies the threat, but the image is not a literal shooting scene. Mistake 5. Identifying every phrase as a separate poetic device. Use accurate labels. Skin, bodies, hearts, veins, and blood together form an extended body metaphor and support personification. Yellow leaves are a metaphor for hearts. The direct appeal to the god of May is apostrophe. Stripped, trample, and torn create violent imagery. Here is a 10-line revision exercise. Write one sentence on the opening. The opening sounds like testimony. Write one sentence on the trees. They are stripped, naked, and deprived of hearts, meaning leaves. Write one sentence on the leaves. They are scattered and can be trampled without protest. Write one sentence on the birds. They herald dreams but are exiled from song. Write one sentence on the voices. They are imagined as torn from throats. Write one sentence on the dust. It represents defeat and mortality. Write one sentence on May. May represents spring, mercy, and renewal. Write one sentence on resurrection. It represents the return of life. Write one sentence on green. It represents fresh growth. Write one sentence on song. It represents the return of voice, freedom, and hope. If you can write these 10 sentences, you can expand them into almost any answer from this chapter. For a 2-mark question, use 1 or 2 of them. For a short answer, connect 2 or 3. For a long answer, organize them into an introduction, evidence, explanation, and conclusion. One more useful practice. Compare the first and last lines of the emotional journey. At the beginning, autumn strips the trees and leaves them naked. At the end, the speaker asks for green. At the beginning, leaves are scattered and trampled without a moan. At the end, he asks one bird to sing. At the beginning, nature loses its voice. At the end, voice becomes the first sign of recovery. This is the poem's design in one clear contrast. Finally, remember that exam answers should be precise. Use hearts for the leaves. Use god of May for the power of renewal. Use greenery for the gift of green. Use birds for those exiled from song. Use personification for the human treatment of trees and birds. Use cautious hope for the ending. Revise the complete supplied chapter once more after this lecture and use the question bank to test yourself without looking at the answers first. Now the class is complete. The poem has moved from destruction to silence to prayer and finally to renewal.